I'm reviewing 13 books today. Why did I think this was a good idea? Yes, we're back once more, with the last G.U content I need to cover, today being the G.U tie-in novels. 3 of them are canon, 9 are 2 differing alternate takes on the series events, and the last is a collection of parody-esque comedic shorts and short stories, 2 of which a lot of people like to think of as canon, and they were all published in Japan's .hack magazine. Japan has a lot of digest magazines made about their various media. All of them were released by the now-defunct Tokyopop, and are rather difficult to find. I think I got my collection together right as they all fell into complete obscurity, though if you're at all interested, you might want to check a half-price books or something, and some of them are available online. As you can tell from the amount of material I have to cover, these are going to be rapid-fire recaps showcasing the books, their merits, and some of their issues. And yet I'm still going to split this review into 2 smaller videos simply because, well, this is a few thousand pages of material. So let's get started with something Roots should have fucking covered, with .hack Alcor. By now, for the preceding 19 videos, you all know my issues with Roots, that it is a complete and utter failure both as its own story, and as a prequel meant to inform the action seen in the entries that follow it, to the point it's on the verge of being non-canon, as pretty much everything either ignores or reinterprets its events to the benefit of the rest of the franchise. Alcor is thus what Roots did not in fact do. It's a vignette focused on showcasing the backstory of varying members of the main cast through the eyes of an audience surrogate, while having it still focused on telling the story of those characters. 6 months before the beginning of Rebirth, the player Nanase, no, not that Nanase, becomes infatuated with Syllabus, and ends up joining Canard in an attempt to get close to him. However, due to her shy nature, she finds her efforts overshadowed by the camaraderie Syllabus shares with Alkaid, who as the manga begins, has just earned her Demon Palace empress-ship, Syllabus being a close supporter of her efforts. I love this. It adds a new context to why he and Gaspard would have been so big on the arena, if they at one point had a personal stake in it. Plus, it shows more of Alkaid before her pride got to her that gels with what's showcased in Reminisce. She ends up cutting to the root of Nanase's envy with a simple statement. What have you done that's worthy of praise and attention? Turns out Chika had been trying to get Nanase out of her shell for a while, as the 2 girls go to the same school, but little really comes of it, aside from her mimicry of Alkaid on several levels in idolization. Nanase wanting to be more like her. Things are complicated by Team Only One Target making Alkaid and Canard suspicious of her, spreading a rumor she's actually a Kestrel insert to better prey on weak players, brought about when Alkaid spoils their fun on a PK hunt. Such an interpretation is not held when she chokes on going to help Syllabus when he's targeted by their attacks. While Alkaid takes it at face value and becomes hostile to her, Syllabus remains supportive, born out of understanding her nature a bit better than the outgoing and confident Twinblade. A chance encounter with Kun ends up being the pep talk she needed, however, as to show her resolve to improve herself, she embarks on a shop quest to collect all the game's lucky animals, unbeknownst to her, also assisted by Kaede in getting the data. It results in her earning a pair of dual swords, the Dorje hatchets, which are Alkaid's starting weapon when you recruit her, thus finding a way to succeed despite her failings and weaknesses. She gives them to Alkaid in preparation for her match with Andrance, which she of course loses. But the faith and trust in people is what encourages her to try again and keep trying afterwards, the book ending with Nanase in real life moving, before returning to the world to join Moontree under Kaede. There's good moments throughout that showcase aspects of Syllabus and Alkaid's characterization from the main series, teases that tie into the events going on at that period in the timeline, even inferences that Bordeaux's MO seen with the events with her were all part of their tried-and-true tactics. Though it also ends up feeling like character redundancy, as Nanase has a similar persona to Adelie, just without the baggage of a lack of self-esteem. There's also a background thing with Saku shifting from a fervent Alkaid supporter to the beginnings of obsession with Endrance that got snuck in. Overall, for a short story, I really like it, and it seems like the Viewpoint character achieved the beginnings of personal growth she would continue with past this, which fits the themes of the series. And like another similarly purposed character I could name that did absolutely nothing, and is anathema to that. It makes me want to see more of this group's misadventures in that 6-month gap. Though, you're not going to believe this, we actually met Nanase in the games. For her player would end up becoming Sephora, the leader of Moontree's medical and assassination division. I have no idea how the hell that happened, but this only makes me wish that had been addressed in some form. Speaking of better prequels than Roots, you guys remember Midori, the Edge Punisher that kicked the Terror of Death's ass? I should probably finally tell what her shtick was. And yeah, Dot Hack's cell is focused around her, and my god, the symbolism in that name. Cell is the story of Midori Shinomura, a teenager that falls ill inexplicably, her physical condition quickly deteriorating to the point she's almost paralyzed, and upon the urging of her friend Kaho, she begins to play the world. At least you think that at first, and then the twist happens. In reality, Midori was chosen as the subject of a new medical procedure, the virtual cell, which creates an AI representation of a person to try and map an illness's progression. But due to Ultimate's monopoly over computer operating systems in the Dot Hack universe, in tandem with so much of the hospital's network being interfaced with the world R2 from the other patients spending their time playing it, and the world in and of itself being catnip to any developing AI, and an imprint of Midori's mind being placed on the AI, it's a lot of factors here, it enters the world and creates a character. An Edge Punisher. Yeah. As AI are knowledge sponges and not bearing the developmental limitations that Ida does, this Midori develops logic first, then an eagerness to experience life and its thrills, and running on instinct becomes a chaotic PK, drawing the ire of Sakaki and his Moontree division, eliminating the forces he sends after her, bar one. The one is a player named Adamas, who ends up befriending her as he keeps coming back and awakens sparks of normal emotions. Eventually. And after witnessing a battle between Azure Kite and Ovan, Midori experiences sheer, unadulterated terror that begins to spark more normal interaction. And I really shouldn't have used Roots footage there because, big surprise, that is incongruent with what is actually depicted in this novel that said episode was specifically made to tie into. How do you do that? It also re-showcases the fight between Midori and Haseo, and Haseo is neither apathetic nor a lunatic as he was characterized at this point in the timeline in Roots. Yes, even these novels, which are canon to the series, are non-canon with respect to Roots. Have I properly established how bad that anime is yet? In honesty, it kinda makes for an interesting kindred spirit dynamic with her and Haseo during the few times they interact here, especially in relation to the Sora Vagrant AI that held part of Ryo Misaki within it, such being far less hostile there, both of them seeking Tri-Edge for different reasons. Haseo to bring life from his end, and Midori seeking an end to her own life. Her professional victim thing learning the new context that the thrill of evading death brings her elation. Though because of that camaraderie, Bordeaux, during the early side of her obsession with killing the Terror of Death, sees Midori and Adamas as targets, and as Adamas is rather cowardly, she corners him and tried to get him in a catch-22. Give them Haseo, or they'll go after Midori. Instead of doing either, he just stands and lets the PK Legion Bordeaux's assembled use him as their own carving board, which Midori eventually comes to witness. It only ends when another player goes berserk, and as more incidents occur, it's likely more preliminary level Ida infections, and some of the incidents that we'd see Yada obtain footage of concerning Azure Kite denigrating normal players, presumably precursors to IDA PCs. However, from the incident, it makes Adamas ask Midori out, and she doesn't know she's an AI, somehow traversing the net to show at their meeting place without ever realizing she's not there physically. And it's only when she chickens out on trying to signal him do the pair realize she's not really there. Compounded with Midori learning and then remembering what she almost did to her friend, it makes her realize the Swiss cheese state of her memory and the revelation about herself. The ultimate result being an existential crisis. And the question we all ask at one point in our lives: who am I? Her logging out this time allows her to discover her nature as the ghost in the machine, vividly recognizing the deconstruction of her R2 avatar, described in the book as her body literally being ripped apart. She spectates through the world as she remembers every facet of her creation, the shock leaving her detached, and viewing herself as less than a person by being nothing but data.
She's not, of course, even being able to conceptualize herself to the point she's thinking of her existence in these terms, so she's already breached the threshold of sentience and joined the world's various AI residents.
But I get where she's coming from, as it's destroying the conceptions of herself, and that revelation leaving her no ground to stand on. At first not even acknowledging the mail sent to her from those concerned about her, which included Haseo, for, as said before, the lunatic in Roots is not Haseo.
Hell, when she first comes back, she saves Nanase from Bordeaux. Yes, this Nanase. And these books were written by different people, and yet have a more cohesive continuity than Roots brings. I hate to keep bashing on the series, but it's true. Roots is worthless.
When she begins to recover from the shock, she tells Adamas everything, the two embarking to find out the state of the true Midori, and piggybacks on Adamas' N2D to the hospital, stunned by the vast amount of input the real world possesses when the interface with Adamas allows her to access some of his senses. They discover, with the assistance of Kaho, Midori's friend, that the real Midori's condition has devolved so she's at death's door, and through diving into the machines that keeps her alive, do the two Midoris meet, the organic one having given up. It takes some time, but Midori comes to realize what was imparted to her from her real self upon her creation. It was the ill girl's will to live, which is causing her to waste away more than anything else.
The initial symptoms that's described in the novel make me think she was IDA infected and afflicted with Doll syndrome, concerning the physical paralysis that alludes to Adeli's condition in Reminisce, and the emotional detachment we see from the real Midori that is a key symptom. Plus, she got sick close to CC Corp where IDA is nested. The problem is, Midori is characterized as someone that is somewhat ubiquitous, not even owning an M2D or an account with the world. So there's never really a point where she could have become infected by IDA, bar one scene where Kaho shows her what the inside of the world looks like.
Though such would gel with an aspect of Midori's, the AI's, existence, as in another incident where she, Adamas, and Kaho are trying to understand what to do, we learn that she is infected by IDA. The black dots slowly creeping their way up along her character model, until in a mass outbreak of mutated IDA PCs and the appearance of Azure Kite, does it burst forth and take control of her. However, the dilemma that has been born of her revelations, how to give the real Midori back her will to live, is something easy to solve. It can be given back by seeking her own death, by returning to the cell that first birthed her life, something that Data Drain can grant her, and does, rebelling from the IDA that consumes her long enough for Azure Kite to unleash the power of the Twilight Bracelet. In the epilogue, having recovered fully, the real Midori takes the AI's place in the world, backed by Adamas and Kaho, and claiming the memories of her other self from her fallen sword, which she treasures.
Honestly, Cell's not that good. It's disjointed, there's a lot unexplained, and I don't think the translation of it was very good either, as there's a lot of moments where pronouns and descriptors for characters are all over the place.
It does eventually congeal, but I think it would have worked better as a manga to tell the story, and you kind of need the second book for the first to make any form of sense. I enjoy it, mainly because it's in that period that Roots is even more terrible at addressing, but for a casual fan, it's anything but straightforward, and takes a lot of guesswork and extrapolation concerning knowledge of the rest of the series to make sense. And for a book that's trying to be related but standalone, not a good thing.
Which brings us to the G.U novels.
As I've said before, the novels are based on Tatsuya Hamazaki's original drafts for G.U.'s story, updated after such was finalized, and condensed down into 4 novels. So there's a lot that gels with the main story and better informs such events, even through the divergent contexts, intentionally changed to fit the novels. Some of the highlights being insight into the real lives of the cast, such as Ryo Misaki visiting Shino in the hospital near daily.
Though the divergences begin from the first chapter, as instead of in Makanu, Haseo encounters Adelie when he saves her from Bordeaux, contrasting it against Ryo and Shino's meeting offline before she fell comatose. There's a bunch of extensions to scenes you see in the games, some dialogues differing, and often give some better clarity to things some thought were ambiguous, but wouldn't have narratively flown in a game or anime. They work pretty well when they do sync up, making the interactions feel a bit more natural, help that the book gets more into Haseo's head, whereas one has to interpret the events in a game from what's presented.
At least in the first book. But one of the things that I feel hurt the novelization is the excisement of Syllabus and Gaspard.
Sure, the pair started off as a bit annoying, but their role I felt was an important grounding one. In their place instead is Bo, who's a lot more, confident, still in Canard, but not shoving Haseo into the position of leadership and responsibility the other two did. That helped break him out of his anger and selfish obsession, and get him connecting to people again after 6 months of shutting others out or fleeting interactions.
Though as said in previous videos, here the phases take the form of special weapons, which weakens the underlying symbolism present from them in the games. Also, for some reason, Kun is a Lord Partisan instead of a Steam Gunner. I don't know why, as originally he was going to be a Blade Brandier until the game designers realized they were using that class too much and not giving us any of certain others.
And when the awakening comes again, Scathe manifests as a scythe rusted black from the blood dried upon it, the book using a different method than the intent to kill to manifest it, instead forged from pouring out the pain and emptiness of a loss which is gouged into one's soul.
It's also made clear that using and battling with a phase is not only mentally exhausting, but creates sensory feedback, the pain felt in the game translating to the related nerves.
The battling of the avatars causes a crossing over and linking of minds, calling out to the other to create a bridge in understanding. Again, both from the original intent of the 8 programs that are at the root of each phase. Ryo thus sees Kaoru's memories of Mia. The original Mia.
And yeah, Kaoru was present when CC Corp killed Mia for the phase remnants. I hadn't had a chance to read these when I wrote the Rebirth reviews, but I have never felt worse for extrapolating a right answer from the subtext of a scene.
The Adelie Haseo stuff that concludes Rebirth is both better and worse. Because the novel doesn't give us much of their exchanges, the blow-up between them feels a lot more shallow, as do the words in his apology, because it's reliant on there being a lot more interactions than is present here. But Haseo explains to Adelie that he screwed up in unfairly relating her to Shino is in turn more explicit, and he's able to fully apologize before Azure Kite shows up and Ida steals Innis, closing the first book.
The entire second novel, in turn, being the Ida server incident, addressing the stuck-in-a-game thing more in depth, and in a manner you'd expect from Log Horizon. I really need to get around to watching Log Horizon.
It also gets into the backstory of the Revive Aura plan, previously expounded upon in the Terminal Disc, to pad it out, allowing this story to achieve its own standalone status by delivering this right when it was most needed. As in the game, we were admittedly less interested in such at that time.
It's a decent replacement for one that doesn't have access to the terminal disk or ripped copies of its information. The problem is, a number of the details are wrong. I'm not entirely sure why, but the translation quality drops noticeably past the first book. There are a ton of errors. Character names and terminology wrong, innumerable typos, even the font is inconsistent from page to page, and the text is a lot more stiff. It doesn't get downright unreadable, but I expect better from a professional company, especially when they did a hell of a lot better in a preceding book. It's baffling, as there were fan consults on these books and editors to catch this stuff. Potentially explicable, as these were released in the last year of Tokyopop's printing of such novels. The final book, 8-Dimensional Thoughts, released in the last month they physically printed stuff. Which makes this potentially the rarest English printed .hack book. It's mine, I tell you! Mine! Suffice to say, while the first book is engaging, the other three are a lot more dry.
Adeli's loss of her phase also makes her lose her hearing here, instead of resulting in partial paralysis. Making sense, since Innes's ability was the hearing of Ida, and a meeting with Reiko in the real world showcases how much of a wreck the series' events have left Haseo, in his desperation to save the lost ones. Especially with absolutely no moral support for events that could have been supplied from Canard.
See, the levity has a point. Oh, and the second book also has a cameo by Haruka Mizuhara, better known as Hokuto. It's pretty much just there to rehash their book and get more details on the epitaph of Twilight that forms the basis of the world, but it's appreciated.
Similarly, Kuhn's heel-face turn is motivated on continuity, but taking a divergent path from a single aspect of characterization, which are all addressed and explained. Since his existence as Sieg in R1, you get the idea that Katsumi has been chasing heroes, naming himself in a similar theme to Balmug, becoming a high-level player, the book characterizing him as a seeker of justice, and Ovan gets to him by playing devil's advocate, that he can lead everyone to the salvation Yada in his obsession won't.
And then the third book carves open Adeli's soul. Yeah. The majority of it is dedicated to the Moontree incident, likewise getting in Chigusa's head.
It's admittedly a lot more tame than what I talked about in the final Reminisce video when I discussed Her Truth previously, but with the decline in translation quality, I think for the first part of it, they may have been missing the point of the hesitant introspection, following by late in the book slamming us with the feels train, and Haseo saving her by being able to connect to her pain and loneliness by exposing his own to her, which leads to her salvation. I do like the imagery that's built with Sakaki sitting upon a throne of Ida and player corpses, while Adeli's heart is bared for them all, to reinforce that this brat's a complete and utter bastard, actually fully deceiving Adeli to believe he's helping to lead into the Moontree incident instead of breaking her emotionally.
But as the final arc doesn't have him as the villain in it, it downgrades him from central antagonist by making him an Ida PC from the outset. And I think that's ultimately a mistake because of how, well, that villain has aged and in fact become better due to extremists using his modus operandi becoming more prevalent on the internet as web personalities, pushing their own agenda onto others and manipulating their followers to only their own gain.
Worse, after Kuhn kills Sakaki to purge the greater Ida infection of Moontree, which was being facilitated by Adeli, his return to Ovan makes him speak a very long diatribe about how Adeli made him do it, which is complete and utter bullcrap. He has CC Corp put Kuhn in charge of G.U. over giving that chance to Sakaki, since Kasumi Tominari's replaced Sakaki's part as a manipulated player, and speeds through to the final awakenings, leading to his reveal of Tri-Edge to Haseo.
8-Dimensional Thoughts is thus where it completely goes off the rails into its own entity. With total control of the world, Ovan forces the confrontation with Haseo more deliberately while he prepares for his end goal. And his end goal isn't exactly the salvation of the lost ones. See, in this version, Aina is Ovan's daughter, and Aina is dead.
And I don't mean PK'd and comatose due to Ida. I mean, in the real world, she has long been nothing but a corpse.
I did say Redemption was weak, but better. Though this book doesn't even touch Kubia.
So his plan instead revolved around creating another birth of the goddess, a new AI forged from a consciousness trapped in the world that no longer has a body to return to. Thing is, he goes about it a lot more harshly, essentially sundering the empathy that was built for the guy.
And for how bad it gets, he literally compares Haseo's quest to get back his friend to an interpretation of Sleeping Beauty where the prince that wakes her rapes and impregnates her beforehand. I am not even kidding. You're continually scaling the cursed white tower and raping Princess Shino Nanao as she sleeps in a bed of thorns. Yeah, this book can go straight to hell. Hey, you guys still want this?
As Ovan's plan can only succeed once Ryo reaches his own apotheosis, the face-off with his former self as Sora is a lot more blunt, to say the least. Not indicative of the final shift in a long character arc of him actually growing up and maturing, most of which has been excised. And instead of X form, it grants him the body of the Angel of Death, his third form turning white and gaining wings as shown on the cover.
There's a lot of discussion of Buddhist theology and chakras, and the use of a bunch of metaphors from the exchanges between Ovan and Haseo before the end, and I understand very little of it. If this video was just on these 4 books, I might have researched it, but I feel it would take far too much time for me to grasp what was meant here fully.
Also, this book more prominently showcases one of the interpretations of Zelkova's identity, that of a vagrant AI, one of many that arose and hid themselves within the world and came to interact with the players benignly. Ultimately, Ovan does succeed at the cost of himself, everyone recovering, as Aina, now a new phase of the epitaph as the artificially intelligent ninth anima, is left to explore her new domain.
So yeah, the novels aren't actually good, mainly as they are detached. Simultaneously too reliant on the game's story to fill in missing pieces of the narrative, that part actually working, but they're flippant about aspects that help congeal them and make them great. They speak of the connections they forge and aspects of the characters, but without the time given to it forming. As a companion piece to Rebirth and Reminisce, it's better to give an extended view to some scenes, but the cutting down for the light novel length I ultimately feel was a detraction. The original stuff is mixed at best. Not helped that it keeps pushing the Shino is Haseo's one true love that rejected him thing that, well, no part of the franchise has enough evidence to justify, like it does with Haseo and Adelie's evolving understanding of each other, and completely misses the stages of grief symbolism in their relationship, which everything else seems to get. And this next series of books is where things vary most wildly in adaptation.